It's your voices that need to be guiding the work that we are doing as candidates and as elected officials.
Welcome, Mr. Aazami. It's very exciting to have you here with us today on this episode of Pizza and Politics. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, this is a virtual installment of Pizza and Politics, and we don't have anyone, or we don't have any pizza with us today. So to get started, what is your favorite topping on pizza?
Oh, that is a fantastic question and a very difficult one to answer as well. So I do love mushroom pizzas, just mushroom in general. It's one of my favorite flavors. So that would be my answer. And I also have a very strong opinion about pineapple on pizza. So I'm Iranian, but I was born in Italy and I still have some family in Italy. And I always make the joke that my Italian aunt would probably never speak to me again if she ever saw me putting pineapple on my pizza. So just out of fear of being slapped by my aunt, I avoid putting pineapple on my pizza. No, I'm kidding. But my wife loves pineapple on her pizza, so it's always a point of contention as well. But my firm belief, pineapple does not belong on pizza. I apologize if I'm isolating any voters by saying that, but it's my heart of hearts, it does not belong on pizza.
Yeah, we've seen that with a lot of our other guests where, they got a strong opinion about pineapple. Yeah. Getting back into the more political stuff, or just jumping right back into it. Can you tell us a little bit about how your career in politics first got started and what some of your inspirations and motivations were?
Of course. So starting a little bit further back than that, I'm an Iranian American. I'm an immigrant. I'm a public health activist. I'm a husband, and I'm a soon-to-be dad. And I'm running on a bold progressive platform to oust a corporate Democrat who's been in office for over 2 decades with very little to show for it. He is one of those members who leads from behind and is not an advocate for the structural reforms our communities need to be able to uplift and empower working people, to dismantle white supremacy and end corporate welfare. That's what our campaign's all about. And like many folks, like I did not grow up wanting to be in politics. I was raised by 2 Iranian American immigrants, folks who fled religious persecution in Iran as teenagers. And growing up, my mom worked in retail from my youth. She worked every day, weekends, holidays, whenever it was, she was working. And that left me being raised by my grandparents. My father was going back to school to become a primary care physician, and he is now a family doctor here in the Valley in Canoga Park. And my background's always been in public health on the programmatic side and fighting for social justice through the lens of public health. Public health is one of those disciplines where you're looking at addressing the root causes of issues and why it exists, what kind of policies were put in place years and years ago that we're still living the consequences of to this day. And how do we take that upstream approach, and as opposed to putting Band-Aids on bullet wounds, and as opposed to more small ideas, more incremental change, how do we push for those transformative solutions that really look at issues comprehensively and holistically and meet the community where they are at and ensure their voices, their priorities, their values are the ones that are guiding and informing the programs that we create, the policies that we enact and fight for, and so on and so forth. I first started out working for a residential treatment center in central LA. The head psychiatrist there, he had a zero tolerance policy when it came to drug use. And a lot of the folks who were at that residential treatment center were mandated to be there as part of their parole, were brought there by family, had mental health conditions, and taking a zero tolerance policy, if you're caught using drugs, you're in violation of your parole, you're going back to prison. So we're not providing folks with services, we're not providing folks with healing, we're criminalizing the issue as opposed to taking a public health approach and building environments that engender health and taking that structural approach and saying, well, as opposed to just looking at the individual, which we as a society love to do, put all the blame on the individual, put all the focus on the individual, take a step back and say, well, what do the environments look like? What are the policies in place that exacerbate or perpetuate houselessness in our communities, or lead to people having such crippling medical debt that they have to take out a second mortgage or have to close their home and are forced to evict because they can't pay rent anymore. They can't pay for their utilities anymore. How do these systems create those kinds of issues? And how do we as policymakers and as advocates change those structures, put forth the policies that are human focused, not corporate focused, and really elevate the voices of the people with those lived experiences, have their voices and their priorities guide and inform the work that we're doing. And that was an approach that we took quite a bit when I was working for a national indigenous healthcare nonprofit, where we would never move forward on a policy or advocate on an issue without the firm backing of tribal nations. Their voices, their priorities directly impacted and informed and guided the work that we were doing Capitol Hill. And, you know, I'm proud of the work that we accomplished, but we are so far past small fixes. We are so far past doing the bare minimum. We need structural reform. This is our time. We are at a precipice in our country where we have to push forward bold solutions that directly address the needs of working people, or we're going to fail to address the many challenges before us.
So moving on, what are some actions you want to take in the future to advocate for explicit change in benefiting to serve the working class?
Yeah, so we have a lot of top priorities, but the four that we're most focused on is single payer Medicare for all, so transforming our healthcare system to establish a national single payer system under Medicare for all. I strongly support legislation from Bernie Sanders in the Senate and Pramila Jayapal in the House, because the fact of the matter is, so long as healthcare operates as a business, as opposed to an inherent human right, we will not guarantee healthcare for all. Because from the perspective of insurance companies, their focus is on maximizing profit, not guaranteeing coverage for all Americans. And I want to make clear that includes all Americans, including undocumented Americans. We have to be inclusive and approach it from a position of equity and true transformative justice. We also need to guarantee housing for all as an inherent human right. These are just, it is not radical to say everyone deserves housing. It is not radical to say everyone deserves healthcare. It is not radical to say everyone deserves education. These are essential needs that benefit all of us. It benefits our individual lives, our family lives, our communities, but it's also essential for our national security. It's essential for our economy. It's essential for our nation's public health. And so guaranteeing housing for all, that's a huge issue here in LA. LA is ground zero when it comes to our housing crisis. Prior to COVID-19, we had 66,000 unhoused community members across LA County. And we know the situation is exponentially worse now as a result of the pandemic, as a result of tens of thousands of Angelenos losing their jobs, losing their wages, losing their healthcare, losing their homes. And as always, it's the youth telling us the way the solutions need to look like. Just yesterday, there were a group of young activists outside the home of LA City Council President Nuri Martinez, demanding that the city approve the use of federal funding to house and shelter our unhoused community members for the duration of the pandemic. Back in January, President Biden authorized FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, to provide local governments with 100% federal coverage to shelter or unhouse within hotels. So it imposes no cost burden on city government here in LA. It's essentially free federal dollars to shelter unhoused, and the city is sitting on their hands. They have yet to take that approach. Guaranteeing housing for all is a racial justice issue. It's also an economic justice issue. We're also focused on climate justice and guaranteeing climate justice and passing a Green New Deal and legislating on the Green New Deal. We have over 16 policies on our website to that effect to guarantee that these transformative solutions come into fruition. And we also need to decriminalize our immigration system. We need to abolish ICE and invest in healing, fully fund our immigration and asylum courts. When our federal budget for ICE is around $7.5 billion, yet we're funding our immigration courts at 5% of that amount. It's no wonder we have a backlog of over 1 million people that are waiting for their day to be able to get their citizenship. The focus is on criminalization and incarceration. Even though Biden placed a moratorium on deportations, which was lifted a couple days ago, very quietly, I might add, in between that time, ICE, as a rogue agency, continued to deport our community members. They are not there to ensure our community has the resources they need. Their job is deportation. And so decriminalizing our immigration system and fully investing in a human-centric approach is how we solve these problems.
So I think, and that was great. This is an issue that young people are very passionate about. But moving on, what are some of your plans on working towards getting the New Way Forward Act passed? And how will this act benefit the community and society? And what impacts are you hoping to make by passing and or repealing other laws such as the American Dream Act and the Promise Act?
So not repealing the American Dream Act. So great question though. So the American Dream and Promise Act, that would create a pathway to citizenship for our undocumented Americans, about 11 million dreamers and TPS holders that we have here in the country. The legislation was introduced last Congress. There is a version of it that was reintroduced a couple days ago. And I think there are a lot of good things in it. It includes a lot of the important pieces around the American Dream and Promise Act, mainly that pathway to citizenship. But it does not go quite as far as I would hope it would. For example, we need to be able to fully fund our immigration courts. That bill does not do it. The one that was reintroduced, mind you. It also does not decriminalize border crossings. I firmly believe we need to decriminalize it and make it a civil offense, not a criminal offense. I also think that we need to abolish ICE and move towards, again, a system grounded in providing people the resources that they need. Now, there are some other good things about the new bill that was introduced. It would also repeal the 3 and 10-year bans, which historically have forced our undocumented individuals to leave the US while they await citizenship, despite qualifying for legal status. So again, there are some good things in there, but again, I firmly believe we cannot take a patchwork approach. We cannot take a small ideas approach. We need to be honest and holistic in how we address these issues and really take a fully comprehensive approach.
Sorry about that. Yeah, that's very important. So moving on the sort of the campaign side of things, what unique challenges do you face as a young person and political newcomer in your congressional campaign?
Well, you know, we're very focused on building a new political coalition to oust a long-standing corporate incumbent. We are focused on inspiring and turning out young voters, Latinx voters, Iranian voters. There are a lot of Iranians in our district, and recognizing that by taking an inclusive approach and meeting our community where they're at, and registering folks to vote, and speaking to our communities and making sure that all of our materials are as culturally and linguistically appropriate as possible. These are ways that we can ensure that we are having honest dialogues with all of our community members. I will never turn anyone away. No stone left unturned. And we need to build our name recognition, right? That's one thing that incumbents always have an advantage on, is name recognition. The incumbent also has over $2 million in the bank from his corporate donors and lobbyists. 98% of Brad Sherman's campaign contributions come from corporations like weapons manufacturers, private equity firms, commercial banks, and credit card companies. Whereas we have proudly taken the No Corporate PAC Money Pledge, the No Fossil Fuel Money Pledge, the No COP Money Pledge, the Nations of Profits Pledge, and the Green New Deal Pledge. Last week, we had an awesome volunteer gathering with a lot of local high school students and college students saying, can you come out and speak to our local den clubs in our schools? Can you talk about the issues? And I would love to do so.
Now moving on, you're running against an incumbent, and most of the time incumbents do win their elections. So how will you try to prove to the people of the 38th congressional district that you'll be a better congressperson compared to the current incumbent?
Here's what I'll say. I've chatted with a lot of folks so far, even though we're still in the early days. And a lot of people are tired of politicians like Brad Sherman, who just give lip service back to their community, but aren't advocating for the solutions that matter. For example, Brad Sherman loves to tout the fact that he co-sponsored Medicare for All and co-sponsored the Green New Deal. Well, when was the last time you called for a hearing on either, Brad? When was the last time you called for votes? When was the last time you pressured your colleagues to force a vote on these transformative solutions? When was the last time you introduced a bill to legislate on the vision of Medicare for All and the vision of the Green New Deal? You haven't. And your campaign donors that are actively lobbying against passage of those structural reforms, those tell me and our community a lot more about where your loyalties lie than you co-sponsoring a bill ever will. And I brought up housing earlier. I want to touch on this point again. Brad is literally the guy to do something about our housing crisis. I say that because last Congress, he became the chair of the very subcommittee that has jurisdiction over our federal housing finance laws, that has jurisdiction over new laws to authorize more affordable housing programs. And as soon as he became chair of that committee, private equity and asset management firms on Wall Street started donating thousands of dollars to his campaign. So he's not there fighting for the solutions that uplift and empower working people. He's there to occupy that seat on behalf of corporations. And when I speak to our community members, people are so tired of politicians that speak in generalities around the issue. They are so tired of politicians who are afraid of speaking truth to power and saying, no, when we say housing for all, this is what it looks like. These are the policies that matter. Everything from removing restrictions on access to housing for undocumented, to guaranteeing housing for formerly incarcerated folks, to repealing things like the Faircloth Amendment that have restricted construction of new public housing for almost 3 decades now. These are the things we need to do. Also, strengthening protections for LGBTQ plus community members, where landlords are still discriminating based on gender identity or sexual orientation. This is addressing those problems, passing the Equality Act, things like that. That's how we address the issues and enact the vision of housing for all. Brad Sherman doesn't do that. Brad Sherman does not care about these issues. And when I speak to our community, they're saying, no, Brad Sherman is not there fighting for us. We live in a solidly Democratic district. So there are a lot of folks who vote for Brad Sherman because there aren't other options. And so we're telling our community, look, we can take control of our government together. We can build a movement that fights and advocates for the structural reforms we all deserve. We can create a politics of transparency. We can create a politics of community.
Well, thank you so much for that. I guess we really do appreciate this passion and also time that you've taken to tell us about yourself and your campaign, despite your busy schedule. Why do you think students should take the time out of their busy schedules to learn about the government?
Well, because when we take charge and we recognize that there's power in people, we can achieve so many beautiful things. And it's always young people that are telling us what the vision needs to be and what we need to be focused on. Our campaign is focused on building systems of government that ensure 7 generations from now, our community has what they need. And that's why it's so important for young people to get involved, to get active, because your voices are so powerful. Your voices drive change. Your voices create movements. I am always in awe of our young people and what they achieve when they put their minds together and work in solidarity. And I just hope that I can live up to your expectations, because it's just so inspiring seeing all the work that you do. And our campaign is committed to working directly with youth and having youth be a centerpiece of our campaign. We're doing it already. We want to continue doing it. So I'm very grateful for all of you, because the work that you're doing is what leads to change.